everybody. Welcome to In This Corner, the podcast, episode 20 on Fight TV. I'm joined by my regular pugilistic panelist, my co-hostess extraordinaire, Amber Renee Dixon. How you doing, Amber?
Doing well.
And there he is from friendly West Virginia and looking quite friendly today, Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
Doing great.
We'll get to our special guest in just a moment. I want to mention that a little bit later on in the broadcast here. Amber sits down with Teofimo Lopez, an interview she conducted, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, Amber?
May 25th at his open workout.
And since then, of course, he was all set to take on George Kambosos on Saturday on Triller. That fight has been KO'd due to a COVID test, and we'll get into that, which KOs the really anticipated return of our special guest. He is a long-time sportscaster, 45 years plus behind the microphone, covering everything. Pro football, college basketball, Major League Baseball, the Indianapolis 500, Wimbledon, 14 Olympic Games, of course, summer and winter, but he's really most known for what we're going to talk about on this broadcast. That is his 30-plus years behind the microphone as the lead guy, the blow-by-blow commentator for HBO Championship Boxing. Say hello to Jim Lampley. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing okay, Smitty, and I hope that it is not a KO of my return to boxing for Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos, but rather an early knockdown, which we will attempt to erase in the later rounds. So I'm shocked, to be totally honest, Amber. I hope you've had a recent test because he is symptomatic. And I find it pretty bizarre that something like this could happen this close to the date of a big fight.
And interesting, and we'll when Amber's interview that we're going to play later on, Amber, you got into that with him right away during that interview.
Well, because his camp was so adamant that everybody be wearing masks inside that gym, even if they had been vaccinated. He told me he had not been vaccinated. I had been vaccinated, asked him, could I please conduct this interview without my mask? And his camp said, no, we really are playing it safe, but apparently not safe enough if he's now tested positive and has symptoms.
Well, there was a way to be safe, wasn't there? That was to get the vaccination. It's really a shame that it didn't happen.
When did you find the news out, Jim? I just found out when Amber called me when I was shopping about an hour and a half ago.
That's about the time that I learned it too. An hour and a half ago today. And this is Tuesday. And of course, Thursday, I was getting on a plane to fly to Miami, ready to call fights on Saturday night.
But the good news is postponed until, I think it's, if Lee told me correctly, August the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
It'll take place in Miami. I would assume, of course, that same main event, Lopez and Kambosos, and I would assume the same undercard, Jim, I guess.
If Lee's ever been incorrect about anything, I'm not aware of it. And yes, it would be my understanding at this moment that it would be pretty much the same undercard. At least I don't know of any differences.
The press release today said location to be determined. We were talking ahead of starting this podcast, Jim, about Teofimo having asthma, and that because of that, he may have been hesitant about getting the vaccine, that there may have been some risks because of that pre-existing condition. But I don't want to say I'm not a doctor, obviously.
Well, thank you for advancing at least my speculative awareness. You know, obviously, none of us knows for real at this moment what, the facts are or what they're going to present. I had not known previously about the asthma, and I have no idea, obviously, whether that has any implication relative to the vaccination or not.
Right. Did you get vaccinated?
I'm vaccinated.
Cool.
Yes. Double Pfizer.
Yeah, same with me. But most of this interview anyway, I wasn't going to get into too much of the Triller stuff, what my panelists we're going to do is one thing. I just was, great to have you back on, And I want to start out with something that we have in common, and that is a connection to where you would have been going this week, but where you'll be August the 14th. And that's the Magic City, my hometown of Miami, Florida. In all the years knowing you, I knew there was some kind of connection, but for me, this is for me. Take me through your Miami years.
Well, I was born in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and my father died when I was 5 years old. And by the time I was 11, it was necessary for my mother to chart a new path in life, find a way to support me and my older half brother. And she dragged me kicking and screaming from the mountains of Western North Carolina and the rivers and lakes and streams and mountains that I had grown up with down to, at first, Pompano Beach and then eventually Miami. So I am South Miami Junior High School class of 1963, Southwest Miami High School class of 1966. All of those years were spent pining for North Carolina. I got admitted to the University of North Carolina and came to Chapel Hill, where, by the way, I now live, and somewhat with a mindset that I would never go back to Miami. But I did wind up going back and working for a while. I dropped out of school. I had too much beer in Chapel Hill. So I had a hiatus period in Miami. And a lot of good things happened in Miami, including, ironically, that the very first live prize fight I ever attended was February 25, 1964, in the Miami Beach Convention Center. You boxing academics know exactly what I'm talking about. I saved lawn mowing and car washing money for months to buy an individual ticket for Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston. And my mother dropped me off, and I went in and watched the fight and came home and got on the roof of my house in a tract house subdivision in Southwest Miami, screaming, "I've upset the world. I'm the greatest of all time," et cetera, until my mom came out in the yard and said, "Please get down. You're going to get us arrested." But that was the very first live prize fight I ever attended. And of course, the notion that after 2.5 years without calling fights, I would go back to the microphone and it would happen in Miami is an indicator of the kind of the hand of destiny that I think controls all lives, but most certainly has seemed to control mine. I mean, just to follow up on that, I'll never forget the inner sense of the hand of fate and prophecy that I felt in about round 9 of Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson in Tokyo, February 10, 1990, when I thought to myself, oh my gosh, the very first live prize fight I ever attended was seen globally and universally as the biggest upset in boxing history. And now I am calling the fight, which will replace it, as the biggest upset in boxing history. And you can't experience something like that without thinking, okay, there's a larger narrative here that is being fulfilled. I was supposed to be here in this chair. That's the way I felt.
Yeah. There are no coincidences. I say that often when I do speeches. There are no coincidences. A little bit later on, I was the little boy that would be with Ali the entire camp leading up to March 8th, 1971, which I still think is the greatest sporting event of all time. Ali Frazier won. And I don't know if you know this or not, but on the same day when I'd be with Ali, skipping school, because thank you, Mr. Wilson, my 6th grade teacher would let me do that, supposedly doing a report. I would be down to Biscayne College being yelled at by Don Shula as a ball boy for a team that, no matter what Tom Brady and the rest do you think, there's only one team in Perfectville, and that's the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Sometimes I think this sport, though, boxing, I don't think we choose it, Jim. I think it chooses us.
Oh, I think that's 100% correct. And you had better luck than I did, because I did get my mother twice to drive me the 30 miles or so from our Southwest Miami neighborhood to the 5th Street Gym where I wanted to watch Angelo Dundee training Cassius Clay, and I never hit the target right. I watched him train Willie Pastrano. I watched him train Luis Rodriguez, and I met Angelo Dundee, but I never contacted my all-time hero, Cassius Clay. So, you know, I didn't meet him until many years later when his Muhammad Ali era and his boxing career were complete. And by the way, I think that March 8, 1971 in Madison Square Garden is one of the two great American sports events, and the other I witnessed personally, which is February 22, 1980 in Lake Placid, New York.
Yeah, believing in miracles, right?
Correct.
What did you miss most the last few years, being away from the mic, being away from boxing, being away from the sport? We missed you. What did you miss?
The fights, and you know, and the people. You can't spend long in boxing without falling in love with the variety of the personal experiences you encounter and the fundamental humanity of the people in the sport. I missed that. I missed the fighter meetings on Friday before the fight, sitting down and talking to all of the fighters face to face and getting to know things about their lives and the path that had brought them there. I missed I don't know how to say this without sounding sappy, and I sound sappy so many times anyway, but I missed the love that exists between the fathers and sons, the love that exists between the trainers and their fighters who have spent so many long and difficult hours together in the gym, the love that exists between two great fighters who have just tried to beat the heck out of each other for 12 rounds and then fall into each other's arms. I missed all of that. And it makes me emotional to tell you how much I missed that. And that was part of why I was so excited about coming back. And now I'm still excited about coming back on August 14th.
You know, there might not be crying in baseball, but there is in boxing. God knows I've done it enough, especially when I had my own career. That was something to whine about. But why do you get, because I love it, but what is it that really brings out this raw emotion in you?
Everything about it touches me. There's a fulcrum of life drama that it isn't necessarily unique in boxing, but it's more prevalent in boxing than in any other sport. Every event is about our group attempt to take people from nowhere to somewhere. Most every fighter began doing what he or she is doing to try to escape some circumstance in their life that they wanted to get away from. And when they reach that moment of triumph that tells them that they fulfilled that destiny that they were seeking, there's nothing quite as overwhelmingly emotional as that for me in sports, because it's not a group, it's one person. And yes, they have a team and they're part of a team and there's a group effort that puts them there. But when every fighter knows when they go into the ring, they're alone, and they're facing someone whom they have to try to hurt. And boxing hurts, and all fighters know that they are there to hurt each other, and they appreciate that about each other. They understand that about each other. There's a tenderness in their empathy that shows up, as I say, at the end of the fight. How many times do you see the great fighter, Chocolatito Gonzalez is in the picture in my mind right now, knocking a guy flat, watching the referee count him out, and then before the medical people can get there, kneeling beside him to try to get him back up. How many times have you seen that? And every time it touches my heart and it fills me with love and appreciation for the people in this sport.
When I delivered a speech at the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame years ago, it was called Boxing Hurts So Good, and I used the John Cougar Mellencamp song. And I remember two of my lines before I tossed Amber that I'll just say to you were that fighters, I've always called fighters the most common and uncommon of all athletes, and they seem to always be chasing such a different kind of ghost than most of us would ever understand.
Great way to put it. And let me tell you, other athletes know it and appreciate it. If you go to a function where there are superstar basketball players and superstar football players, baseball players, track and field stars and swimmers and people from all other sports, and Ray Leonard or Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali is there, who is it that the other athletes see as the royalty in the room? It's the fighters, because the other athletes all know that the fighters portray what all of them are doing in a far more direct, fundamental, and human way than everybody else does through a metaphor. You know, every other sport is a metaphor for fighting. Fighting is fighting.
Amber?
Jim, if you believe that boxing was meant to be a part of your life, some sort of higher power involved in it, then how did you rationalize HBO's departure from boxing and thus your departure from boxing?
You know, there are a lot of people who say to me, why did HBO stop broadcasting boxing? And I say to them, you know, you have to understand that what you know of as HBO and what you saw all those years as HBO, that's not the people who walked away from boxing. The people who walked away from boxing were the executives for a telephone company in Dallas, which bought Time Warner. And once AT&T bought Time Warner, then the culture of HBO was no longer in place. The organization that now masquerades under the label HBO is a far different thing than the HBO for which I worked for 31 years. And there's no way that the people for whom I worked for 31 years prior to AT&T buying Time Warner would ever have walked away from boxing. HBO was built partially on a foundation of identity that boxing gave to them. If you look at the meaning of all those fights over the course of the years in the 80s and the 90s and the aughts and what they meant to HBO, there's no way that the original curators of that organization would have walked away from boxing. But, you know, telephone executives from Dallas, whole different trip.
A change in ownership can really change the culture.
Everything. That's exactly right. And I knew the moment that the deal was completed that I was not going to be calling fights at HBO much longer.
Devastating to you at that moment?
Hey, life goes on, you know, and I, at the moment I stopped, I had already had an accidental 44-year network television career. Everything about my career was an accident because it began with me winning a totally irrational talent hunt, 432 candidates from across the country, interviewed by executives who went around trying to find the so-called face and voice of the American college student, the first person who would stand on the sidelines of a football game with a camera and a microphone. I was chosen from that process in 1974 and went to work for ABC, and everything else in my career begins with that and builds off of that irrational initial entry. So when you've been as lucky as I've been, and I think Smitty mentioned 14 Olympics and Super Bowls and World Series and all that kind of stuff. When you've had the experience that I've had, you can't expect it to last forever. You know that at some point along the way, it's going to stop. So devastating, no. I have a life. I have other things in my life. I have 10 grandchildren. So, you know, it was not as though everything had been ripped away from me. Way back when I very first got fired from a network, when an executive at ABC forced me out in 1987, and I had only been in the business 13 years at that point, and I said something to my agent about, oh my God, my career is over. And he said, Jim, they took your job, they didn't take your talent. So I've always remembered that I'm not at a loss for words, whether I'm sitting in front of a microphone or not. And I also had a vague hunch that another opportunity would arise. And it's only because of COVID, I think, that 2.5 years passed before that opportunity arose. It might have happened sooner had it not been for COVID. but that's life too. You accept that, you figure it out, and go on. So it was very exciting to get a chance to get ready to do it again, and I had gotten ready to do it again, and now I'll get a little more ready in the time between now and August 14th.
Jim, why'd you get fired in '87?
Because my original legendary boss at ABC Sports, Roone Arledge, was removed from that position after an ownership change. ABC was sold to a stations group named Capital Cities. They wanted to put their own guy in charge of stations. They needed to move the guy who was in charge of stations at ABC to another position. Arledge was in charge of two divisions, news and sports. So Capital Cities took the logical position, hey, nobody should be running both news and sports. Those are two very big, meaningful divisions where you're making decisions 24 hours a day. Roone, choose one. And he was already the great god of sports television. So news represented the bigger challenge. So he took the news job, and the guy who had run stations at ABC came in to run the sports division and arrived with one major predilection, one big opinion about ABC Sports, which was, who is Jim Lampley and why are we paying him all this money? So he endeavored in every way he could to make me uncomfortable and get me to walk on my contract prior to the 1988 Olympic Games in Calgary, where I had certain contractual guarantees that he did not want to honor. He was very honest about it. He told my agent, I'm going to get rid of him somehow. We're never going to honor this contract for Calgary. And one of the things he did to try to make me uncomfortable and force me out was to assign me to boxing, because he was so certain that I would be allergic to boxing and boxing would be allergic to me. And oh, by the way, in an extended sense, I was succeeding Howard Cosell, and they had been looking for the right person to replace Cosell at ringside for a couple of years after Cosell had declaimed during the Larry Holmes Tex Cobb fight, "This is an advertisement for the abolition of the very sport of which it is a part. I will never call a professional boxing match again." And he didn't. And I had already had the misfortune of being the person who was chosen to succeed Howard doing the halftime highlights on Monday Night Football. And that was a bomb. And it certainly damaged my career to have to do that for a couple of years. So now, you know, this guy looked at it. What can I do to get rid of him? I'll put him on boxing. That will never work. Well, now, of course, I'm a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, courtesy of the guy who thought that making me call boxing was a great way to get rid of me.
As you mentioned, it's been 2.5 years since you did a boxing broadcast. We hear all the time about ring rust for boxers. What about for broadcasters?
I don't know. I guess we're going to find out on August 14th. I'm certainly not, you know, so totally preeningly confident and self-secure that I'm going to say to you, oh, there's no question, I'll be just as good as I ever was. It'll be the same experience. Viewers will like me the same way they did. I don't know. You know, it has been 2.5 years, but I'll do the same homework I've always done. I will go in with the same total love of the sport that I've always had. I'll try to be clear-eyed and objective, as I think I have always been. And you know, unless my brain doesn't work anymore, and I think it does, I should be okay. But I can't guarantee it. It'll be part of the experience, and I hope I'll be good at calling the fights the way I think I was before.
Indeed. You know, for many years at HBO, you were partnered with Larry Merchant, Harold Letterman, and Roy Jones, among others. Now, with Triller, you're going to be working with Snoop Dogg. You're going to be working with other personalities. Chemistry is a big factor in producing a successful on-air partnership. What can you do to ensure that the mix at Triller can be the best that it can possibly be?
Well, producers will work with that, and I trust them to do the best they can in guiding this particular process. I have watched Sean Porter on other delivery systems and networks, I've listened to Sean Porter. I was under the understanding, and I hope it stays in place, that Sean Porter was going to be the expert commentator working with me this weekend in Miami. I hope that's still true on August 14, because I have had a long telephone and Zoom experience with Sean Porter that was exciting in terms of his intelligence and his vision and his potential, because he's just getting started, his potential to be a meaningful expert commentator in the same way that Ray Leonard, George Foreman, and Mike Tyson were. And Roy Jones, not Mike Tyson, Roy Jones. All of them, I think, became meaningful expert commentators, Ray, George, and Roy, all with different attributes to bring to it. I don't know that I'll ever sit with somebody who could give you a prophecy as to what was going to happen in the fight as accurately as Roy did. That was his particular insight. George was great at understanding the emotional landscape of boxing and how fighters respond to various emotional conditions around them when they're fighting. Ray was great at understanding tactics and the moment-to-moment approach to technique and what you wanted to do to stay in control in the ring. Each brought a different attribute to the fight. Roy, as I mentioned, he could say, well, in 25 seconds, you're going to see this. And in 25 seconds, you would see that. And, it was stunning, really. And it made things very easy in a way for Max Kellerman and me. But every boxing telecast is different because the sport is so personal. Football telecasts all have a very similar character. In boxing, you're telling a continuous narrative, and you're telling it in a personal way, and everybody contributes during the course of the action. It's not broken up into segments where, obviously the play-by-play man says 2nd and 10, and obviously the expert commentator takes you through the replay. In boxing, it's more free-flowing. So the kinetic chemistry and understanding among the people who are calling the fight is way more important. And I may not be able to show you until a year or two from now how great Sean Porter is going to be as an expert commentator. I need to find the right ways to set him up, but I will. I promise you that. We're going to go to dinner. We're going to go to lunch. We're going to talk to the fighters together. We're going to enjoy the fights shoulder to shoulder. And ultimately, we're going to build that bond that leads to great commentary.
He will become better if he listens to you, and he will. He's a friend of mine, and he will. Speaking of Roy, he told me to tell you hello. I was with him in Mexico this weekend calling his fights. He joined me at the beginning of the telecast. He had to work a few of the fighters. But I want to talk about, I love Larry Merchant and all the guys you mentioned. But my favorite, because of the way I call a fight as a color commentator, would be, something similar to Gil Clancy, which would be my favorite. And I miss him every day because I can't pick up the phone and call him whenever I want, is Emanuel Steward. Talk about your years with him.
It's very difficult for me to talk about Emanuel Steward. You've already seen how emotional I get and how difficult it is for me to maintain control of my emotions about people that I deeply care about. And Emanuel Steward was the closest male friend I've ever had in life. He was truly a brother to me. And we had a deep and unusual chemistry from the first moment that we had a personal conversation. And that moment took place when I was calling fights for ABC back in the year and a half or so. I called fights for ABC before I finally got the message and walked out the door. And I went to Detroit to do Thomas Hearns versus Dennis Andries for Andries' light heavyweight championship. And under normal circumstances in our business, you arrive at the airport Thursday and a professional driver picks you up in a sedan and takes you to the hotel where you're going to check in. I walked into baggage claim in Detroit and Emanuel Steward was waiting for me. We had not had personal contact before. I knew who he was. He knew who I was. But I walked into baggage claim and he was there. And he said to me, I called the network in New York to find out when you were coming, because I wanted us to get together right away. I want to get to know you. And we went to dinner at the London Chop House that night. And I began to get to know this incredible human being who had come to Detroit from a tiny poverty-stricken town in West Virginia as a teenager, who had lied about his age to get a job on an assembly line in an automobile factory, and shortly after that had begun taking in kids in the inner city and inviting them to train with him because he was training as an amateur boxer at that time. I believe, Smitty, you would know better than I think he won a national championship in the Golden Gloves, maybe 2 of them. And eventually he devolved from fighter to trainer and spent the rest of his life doing what he did at the Kronk Gym. We talk about destiny. I got married to my current eternal beloved wife, Deborah, on August 4, 2012. Emanuel was at my wedding in Del Mar, California. Toward the end of the post-wedding reception party, he began to have some stomach pains. He left that party early and flew back to Detroit. None of us ever saw him again. He was in oncology by the following weekend. So I have, from my wedding night, pictures of Emanuel and me, pictures of Max and Emanuel, pictures of Buffer and Emanuel, because Michael performed our wedding, pictures of all of us together. And I will never, ever, ever forget all of this. The first song that we played after the completion of the wedding ceremony was a Motown song, Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, If I Could Build My Whole World Around You. And as soon as the chords began for If I Could Build My Whole World Around You, Emanuel grabbed my arm and said, I can't believe you chose this. This is my all-time favorite song. Well, the fact is he had about 20 all-time favorite songs, but that was most certainly one of them. And the depth of bond that I feel to that man, you can see how difficult it is for me to talk about him, because that's part of the whole destiny of me in boxing, is that I was supposed to meet him and we were supposed to be brothers. And that's the way it all turned out. And by the way, I feel the same way about Roy Jones, but Emanuel is just a little bit older, and so am I. So that closeness is really hard to replicate.
I hear you, and I agree with you. Lee, what's that you're watching? What's that in the background? That looks like a Lampley called spectacular bout I see in the background there.
It is, and he probably recognizes it too. It's the first fight between Julio Cesar Chavez and Meldrick Taylor, which featured
and who would ever forget it, because of the end of it and the aftermath and the pathos and drama of an unbeaten fighter fighting the fight of his life and putting forth the incredible effort that Meldrick put forth that night. And then for Chavez to relentlessly, mercilessly, brutally beat him down the way that he ultimately did. And the challenge really for the blow-by-blow guy of calling the conclusion of the fight. And, you know, I might have been a little too excited, but I do remember saying that this is a referee's decision which will be debated for as long as people talk about boxing, and there's no question that that decision, Richard Steele's decision to stop the fight, will be debated by boxing fans as long as people talk about boxing.
Everybody asks you all the time about your favorite fight to call and what have you, but I would like to hear from you maybe one or two things that didn't happen inside the squared circle while Jim Lampley was calling a contest, but stuff that went on in and around before, immediately after, because you have been involved in some only in boxing, some crazy stuff that happened. And so I won't set you up on it other than to say, just take us through one or two that just stands out to you.
Well, I don't know what it is about me and Riddick Bowe. I love Riddick. I have I think a fantastic friendship with Riddick. I used to go into fighter meetings, and the producers would want us to talk about boxing, and Riddick and I would talk about barbecued ribs. But obviously, I was calling the fight when Fan Man landed on the apron of the ring in Las Vegas, and there are a lot of great stories that go with that fight. In fact, you may recall that Emanuel Steward trained Holyfield that night and trained Holyfield to his victory over Riddick. So they're both parts of that particular scenario. And then, of course, I'm developing a podcast, and I recently wrote an episode that has to do with the night of July 11, 1996 in Madison Square Garden when Riddick was fighting Andrew Galata, and eventually the referee, I think it was Wayne Kelly. Yeah, and Wayne had to disqualify Galata after continued repeated low blows in a fight that Andrew was clearly winning, and I wound up describing for about 20 or 25 minutes thereafter the riot that took place in Madison Square Garden. So unusual things seem to follow Riddick and me around. And just to go back to Emanuel, when Evander Holyfield reached out to Emanuel Steward to ask him to train him for his second fight with Riddick Bowe, Emanuel, who had seen the first fight, thought to himself, and I'm telling you a story that he told me, more or less word for word, because I made him tell it to me several times. But he had seen the first fight, and his thought was, how in the world am I going to get Evander to beat Riddick Bowe? Riddick is longer, taller, bigger, stronger, and oh, by the way, he has consummate inside fighting skills. So the notion that Evander could go inside and get to his body and beat him up and win the fight that way seems a little bit remote. It didn't happen the first time around. Why would it happen the second time around? And Evander was relentless in seeking Emanuel to train him for the fight. And he said, come on down to Dallas, or excuse me, not Dallas, to Houston. Come down to Houston where I'm training. Come see what I'm doing in the gym. Let's spend a little time together and talk about it. So the first day that Emanuel was in Houston, and he went to the gym and he watched what he watched in the gym, and he still had the same impression as to how difficult it would be for Evander to beat Riddick Bowe. And then afterward, Evander said, let's go out dancing tonight. They were both thrilling dancers. They were good, and they both loved to dance. And so, of course, Emanuel said, sure, let's go have some dinner and go out to dance. And they wound up in a dance club, and they wound up dancing first next to each other and then across from each other, so that there's a moment when they're dancing and Emanuel is looking straight at Riddick and watching Riddick dance, Evander. He's looking straight at Evander. It's all confusing in my mind. Looking straight at Evander and watching Evander dance. And suddenly he says, that's it. That's how we can beat Riddick Bowe. If I can get him to do that on the perimeter and tempt Riddick in, but then dance away and come back and hit and move, et cetera, with that kind of footwork, he can beat Riddick Bowe. Go to the second fight, watch what Evander did, and see how he beat Riddick Bowe with the instructions of the great Emanuel Steward.
You've had such a remarkable career and a remarkable life, but we all go through life's vicissitudes, ups, downs, highs, lows, ebbs, flows. Do you have any regrets on anything, career or personally, in your life? Regrets? I'm getting to an age where they start to creep in. I try to put them, but I also try to learn from them. Do you have any? Does Jim Lampley have any regrets?
Many, a whole lot of them. And, I can see my own imperfections in the hourglass of my memory. And I know the things that I would like to have back. And you can't be in my position and be married for the fourth time, 3 divorces preceding it. You can't have children, a couple of them who have had problems and difficulties in their lives that you may have helped to germinate or allowed to proliferate more than should have been the case. I mean, my wife always says to me, stop looking back, quit blaming yourself for things that really were the troubles of other people. But I can't, I can't disassociate the life that I had. I remember early on in my sports broadcasting career, watching the behaviors of producers and other commentators with whom I was working on the road, and how all of the privilege of it, material privilege, behavioral privilege, being glorified by people around you, how that could contaminate them. And I used to say to myself, don't allow that to contaminate you. But it did. And I did things that I'm not proud of. And, I only hope that as time goes on in my very carefully considered behaviors now with my adult children and all my grandchildren, that I do better, and that I have learned enough from the humanity of the people with whom I've worked, and particularly the humanity of the people in boxing, to be better as a family man, better as a friend, better as a father and a grandfather than I have been in the past. I think we should probably all have that ambition. Emanuel and I used to talk about it all the time. And so, yes, absolutely, I have regrets.
How does Jim Lampley want to be remembered as a blow-by-blow commentator and as a man?
Well, as a blow-by-blow commentator, I want to be remembered as the guy whose mother sat him down in front of a television set when he was 6 years old, at a party for adults in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and said, you stay in this room and you watch the Friday night fights on Gillette. This will be Sugar Ray Robinson against Bo Bowles, and it's their second fight. And everything you need to know about boxing, a man named Don Dunphy is going to tell you in the next hour and a half. I want to be remembered as a guy who came to boxing somewhat as a matter of destiny, because as my mother said to me that day, you're going to do this because if your father was still alive, this is what you would be doing. So again, I fulfilled my destiny in becoming a boxing commentator. And, my mother wasn't prescient enough to say, here's what will happen, but she was prescient enough to know that it was right to put me in front of a television set to watch Sugar Ray Robinson against Bo Bowles. I want to be remembered as someone who loved the sport passionately, loved the people in it passionately, and did everything he could to tell their stories with accuracy, with realism, and with the love that they show for each other. And I want to be remembered as someone who was incredibly lucky and tried very hard, at least in the latter phase of his career, to honor what luck had given to him.
Well, I'm not going to wish you luck because you're a skilled veteran. But I can't wait to see and hear you back in action on the 14th of August in my hometown of the Magic City with Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos and the undercard there on Triller, and hopefully many more bouts in the future, and hopefully. Because this has been, now I'm going to cry. Hopefully, because this has been that kind of a show, hopefully we just can get you back on. I have so many other questions for you, and I didn't give Lee and Amber all the ample time, but I really appreciate you being on and your honesty and candor, Jim. I've always loved watching your work.
Well, thank you very much. It's been fun. I kind of resent all three of you for being able to push my emotional buttons as accurately and effectively as you have. But, there are certain subjects that the tears are just going to flow. And, Emanuel's one of them. And anything that takes me back to my early life and my mother's ordaining me to care about boxing, and all the luck along the way that gave me chance after chance after chance to do the things I've done. It's all amazing, and I'm just grateful to everybody in boxing for the opportunity I've had.
Thank you so much, Jim. We'll come back. Amber sits down with Teofimo Lopez. Back with more of In This Corner of the podcast on Fight right after this.
Here at City Athletic Boxing Club in Las Vegas, ahead of your lightweight title fight against George Kambosos, lightweight world champion Teofimo Lopez. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I feel like a champ, and we're 10 weeks into camp right now, and we just got a couple weeks left to entertain the boxing world, entertain all the people out there that need that excitement.
You were certainly entertaining for this media workout, the first media workout I've been to in some time, simply because of the pandemic and the coronavirus. I feel comfortable. I've been vaccinated. How about you? Were you able to get vaccinated?
At the moment, no. Me being with asthma and everything, I still have those precautions that, uncertainty. However, I know that they're getting better little by little with the COVID and everything, and how they're doing the vaccinations. And eventually, there will be a point in time where we will have to do it. But at the moment, we're just trying to stay away from, from groups, and just trying to stay focused in camp. That's really what it is, and just giving the fans what they want, giving the people what they want, and it's all about just entertainment.
And I guess that's why you were so adamant about all the media today wearing masks.
Just due to certain things right now, with the climate change and everything coming, it's been about 2 years now, away in Vegas and everything. So with my asthma, it was acting up very strong, and I had to be careful on certain things. Did my COVID test, came out negative, and everything like that. So it wasn't nothing with COVID. However, I had to just take my medication again. Something that I've been in ICUs 3 times in my life. The last one was when I was 12, and I got to say, there was a point in time this camp where it got really bad like that. So we had to be careful, make precautions, and just be careful with all this. And we're getting better now.
Certainly you're working out so hard, it would be natural for the immune system to drop. And I can attest to the allergies here in Las Vegas. Talking about your last fight, a fantastic performance against Vasily Lomachenko. Not only did you beat him, but you outboxed him, surprising so many people. What did you learn about yourself in that fight, or confirm that you had already known?
To myself, I just proved myself that, I am what I say I am, the best fighter in the game. Put them in front of me and I'll beat them. Lomachenko, he was arguably the #1 pound for pound during the time. A lot of folks consider him the next Muhammad Ali, and like a god in the boxing world, and we went out there and at 23 years young, showed the world that, hey, that's not how it goes here. This is the takeover, and we live by that. I'm a man of my word. We called him out for over 2 years, and we got the job done to become undisputed lightweight world champion, and the first one to do it in the lightweight division in history.
Over the weekend on ESPN, he said he watched the fight and thought that it was a draw. Andre Ward had it scored as a draw. Any interest in that rematch?
The whole thing is, the guys make me laugh, Sometimes folks don't want to see you do better than them. That's all it is. They support you and they love you until you're doing better than them. There's no sky for me. The limit for me is not the sky. For me, it's unlimited. It's the Milky Way, and that's what I'm shooting for. It's all about, a lot of folks are interested in seeing what can I do next after beating someone like Lomachenko. You look at the last rounds, the championship rounds, which matter the most in a fight. It's all about how bad you want it. In the 12th round, I landed, over 50 punches on Lomachenko?
You outlanded him 50-18 in total punches, 47-18 in power punches.
So the whole thing is, there wasn't no draw.
Were you worried that the fight was in question at that point?
No, not at all.
So why come out like that so strong? So why come out like that so strong with that output?
Because I wanted it for a knockout. It's the championship rounds. That's what it is. You don't stop or slow it down. I've seen people make those mistakes, Trinidad and Oscar De La Hoya, for crying out loud. Just because you're winning a fight doesn't mean you slow it down. You pick it up, maybe you get a knockout. And I buzzed him and I hurt him many times in the fight. And he felt it. And when the moment got tough and I knew he was going to come strong, I stepped up to the plate and I pushed him back. So it goes to show who's the real true champion there. It's all about Lomachenko. You're a sore loser, and you don't know how to take a win or a loss, and it's all about you get what you get, karma, and you believed in your own hype, and that's where you failed. I wish him nothing but success in the long run for him, but he's out.
Up next, George Kambosos, June 19th in Miami and on Triller. He's a sizable underdog in this, plus 750 last time I checked, but you must respect something about him. What could pose problems for you?
He's a fighter that wants everything that I just worked hard for. 19 years in the gym, blood, sweat, and tears. None of this will be possible. None of this will even matter. My words, anything of it, if I overlook this guy. You know what I mean? Everything will be forgotten. You know, I've seen it happen numerous of times where they support you when you're winning. The moment you lose, they turn around and act like they don't know you anymore. I keep that in the back of my head, and I keep that in the front right here in my third eye. I always stay focused on it. And the whole thing at the end of the day, we're focused on one guy only, and that's Teofimo Lopez at the end.
All right, but there is another guy within the WBC who has a lightweight title. You have the franchise title. Devin Haney has the regular title. As the franchise champion, you don't have to face any mandatories within the WBC. He does, correct?
Oh, no. I could definitely call whenever I need to. You know, the whole thing was that these guys had 4 months after I beat Lomachenko. They call me out on the internet. They call me out on the social media. It's very quick to go and just text, right? So quick nowadays in social media, all Twitter fingers and everything. But when the moment gets tough, they go cat. You know, I'm not going to say that the P word.
Scary cat.
Yeah, they get scary cat. There you go. So, you know, my whole thing, they had 4 months, and before Kambosos fought, he was fighting for the IBF, so he was going to become my mandatory, you know, and that's out of my restrictions.
Within the IBF.
Within the IBF. So these guys have 4 months, not one through a contract for me to fight me. If they want to fight the best, then why not do it, right? But these guys are not like that. So at the moment, we focus on Kambosos. I want to get Josh Taylor, but Josh Taylor looks like he's carried up all the way to 147, rather fight Crawford. So at the end of it all, we're going to checkmate Devin Haney. I'm going to make him my mandatory. If he overprices himself, we're going to make it on purse bid. You can't run from it, bro. You can't run from it. You're going to get this. And those big lips that you got, that's all you got is big-ass lips. And I can't wait to shut them.
Last thing, could we see that fight this year?
Absolutely. You guys are going to see so many fights. I'm bringing boxing into a whole nother point where there's no ducking or dodging. Nobody ain't dodging nobody. These guys maneuvered and moved away from fighting Lomachenko and so on and so forth. You know, Devin Haney called out Loma when he already made his contract with Linares. It's so easy, you know, and these guys fool these guys, but eventually we're going to expose them because what happens is this. When you fake it till you make it, you become fake.
Teofimo Lopez, lightweight world champion. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Back on In This Corner of the podcast, episode 20 on Fight TV, joined by one of the all-time greats, Charlie Burley, and the Charlie Burley cam is there. And Lee said during the break, Smitty, it's not about your shoes. It is about Charlie. Having said that, I am going to get both of my shoes in the shot. Don't they look great, Charlie? Yes, they do. Okay. We are back. And gosh, Amber, that interview with Teofimo, so interesting that right away you got into it about COVID, and so much of what you spoke about right away with him ended up coming to fruition in a negative way with the positive test.
Right. Outside of all that with COVID and him not getting the vaccine because of concerns over him having asthma, what I took away from that is he's a very offensive-minded fighter. And Smitty, you and I have been discussing lately how many fighters are out there that are defense first, who are, with what we know about brain injuries and head trauma, I think it's popular to become more of a defensive-minded fighter like Floyd Mayweather Jr. He seems to be the opposite, though, and kind of an old school throwback to, I'm going to throw my hands and I'm not going to worry about the consequences quite as much. And I've heard him in several interviews say, I tell you guys again and again, I'm not worried about losing. I am just worried about fighting the best and entertaining. And I thought it was kind of the antithesis of what we saw in the Shakur Stevenson fight over the weekend.
And we're going to get to that. Lee's going to, review that fight and preview a couple of the other fights that are coming up. But to pick up on what you said, I'd like to agree with you that it's to do with head trauma and what we all know now, just thinking about Muhammad Ali and so many others. But I think even more influence to this defense first, not get hit and hit. I really believe it's more of a byproduct of Floyd Mayweather and just people trying to emulate and imitate him. But what I hope they do is do it for the reasons you brought up, to prevent head injuries and just whatever. But it is the boxing game. People do love knockouts. They love aggression. They didn't get it from unbeaten Shakur Stevenson the other night, Lee.
They didn't. A few weeks ago, Devin Haney faced a lot of blowback about how the final 2 rounds of his fight against Jorge Linares unfolded. And now Shakur Stevenson is facing much the same criticism about his entire fight against Jeremiah Nakatila. Many called it boring, and Timothy Bradley said he almost fell asleep during the broadcast. And even Shakur himself was moved to issue an apology for his performance. But this was a performance that saw him win 12 out of 12 rounds. He scored a flash knockdown. He allowed just 28 punches to strike him in 12 rounds. That's only a little more than 2 per round. It's superb defense. Statistically speaking, he was outstanding. He allowed 3 or fewer total punches to hit him in all but 1 round.
But Lee, you said his offensive output, though, was way down and beneath the division standard.
It was more than half the division standard. I think it was like 25 punches a round, and lightweights is around 57, 58 punches per round. He got the kind of fight that suited his style the best. It was a low volume, very technically oriented fight. And that's the kind of fight that he really thrives in. And his accuracy on offense was just incredible. It was 38% overall, 46% of his power shots. He only allowed 9% overall and 15% in power shots. That is just minuscule percentage numbers on defense. He was effective on offense.
He said that I think I saw a tweet where he said that something was wrong with him. He wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
Do you buy into it, Amber?
Oh, I was surprised that he issued any sort of apology, because and this is my opinion, I think there's something to be proud of in what he did. Sure, it may not have been entertaining, but it was a masterful performance, and he didn't get hit, and thus he protected that brain, which I'm going back to that because whether it was truly Floyd Mayweather's intention in being that defensive, he certainly did bring it up post-fight press conferences that, people thought it was so cool with Muhammad Ali doing the rope-a-dope. I'm not of that ilk. I'm not going to do that. I want to protect my noggin.
The other thing about that, and you and I watched the fight together, and we had this conversation about, I think, with Anthony Joshua, talking about Anthony Joshua, who I know you're going to be interviewing soon. The fact, though, that I was always taught, though, if you're in there against a puncher, sometimes the most dangerous thing to do is to not go for the kill and not take him out, because he always remains dangerous, especially, now this gets really esoteric, but especially if that guy, that puncher, carries his power into the later rounds. And we'll get into more of that type of topic when we have a trainer on with us. But, so, and also in terms of entertaining the fans, this is why Teofimo Lopez is so loved and looked forward to, is because he's just, an old school dude, and he believes in, and once you process a guy, you go in there and you finish him, and you don't leave it up to the judges. And there's something to be said for that as well. Lee, quickly, before we go on to some other fights you're going to be previewing, and including a guy who I don't think will hold back. At least I haven't seen the monster hold back. What do you think's next for Shakur Stevenson?
Well, the prevailing wisdom is that this fight with Shakur Stevenson was for the interim title, WBO. Stevenson was number 1, Nakatila was number 2. With Stevenson winning, he is now in line to fight WBO champion Jamel Herring next. And Jamel was at ringside for that fight. But there's sort of a tug of war between Jamel Herring and Stevenson to fight WBC counterpart Oscar Valdez next. That's the big money fight. That's the fight that both of those guys want next. Jamel wants to unify. And all great champions want to unify and be undisputed. And Jamel wants that next for himself. And of course, Shakur is standing in his way. Shakur wants to fight Oscar Valdez next, and Jamel is standing in his way.
So they're all top-ranked fighters, correct?
They're all top-ranked fighters.
Then Bob should be able to put it together without any excuses from Saudi Arabia. So hopefully we'll make all that stuff happen.
Yeah.
All right, there's some stuff coming up. I let into Inoue. Why don't we start out with him? And I'll lay out, I'll try to, and just let you preview what's coming up.
Well, Inoue is widely regarded as one of the top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. And he's going to be fighting a Filipino southpaw named Michael Dasmariñas. He's a tall left-hander.
Amber would like you to say that name one more time.
Dasmariñas.
Did you get that, Am?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. He is a tall left-hander. He's got really lively legs, and his best punch is a long southpaw left to the pit of the stomach. He's a very good body puncher, especially for a guy as tall as he is. He also hasn't lost a fight since 2014, but the list of names that he's beaten during that time is nowhere near the universe of Inoue. He's attempting a cosmic leap up in competition. Here's a telling stat, though, about Inoue. Inoue has faced 2 world-class southpaws in his career, Omar Narvaez and Juan Carlos Payano. Both were world champions. He took out Narvaez in 2 rounds to win the WBO 115-pound championship. Inoue jumped from 108 directly to 115 to do that. And against Payano, that fight lasted only 70 seconds, and he knocked him out with a 1-2 to the jaw. So he has a very excellent record against southpaws. But Dasmariñas has 2 things that those 2 guys didn't have: height and reach advantages. And I think Dasmariñas is a very solid operator. He's mobile. He mixes his punches well. He's resourceful. He's a good body puncher. And when he gets into trouble, he's resourceful. But again, he's fighting the monster, and the monster can hit and hit very hard, and he can score the knockout at any time. And I think that the monster is going to take him out in monster-like fashion.
All right, in 2 minutes, get through these other fights that are going to be taking place. One I think you're going to next is one I'm really looking forward to in Jamal Charlo's defense of his title.
Yeah, he'll be making the 4th defense of his WBC middleweight title against Juan Macias Montiel, who earned this opportunity by knocking out a badly shot-born James Kirkland in 116 seconds. Macias is an all-or-nothing guy. All of his victories have been by knockout, and 3 of his 4 losses were by knockout, including a 2-round knockout against Jaime Munguia in 2017. Montiel will push the fight as hard as he can for as long as he can, but because Charlo is a world-class puncher and because Montiel's chin doesn't hold up very well, especially against Munguia, it probably won't against Charlo either. And the other main event that we're talking about is Munguia himself. He's fighting a guy named Kamil Sharameta on DAZN. Munguia was originally supposed to fight Maciej Solecki, Sharameta's countryman, first on April 24th, then on June 19th. Solecki withdrew because of an injury, and Demetrius Ballard was supposed to fight Munguia on the 23rd of April. But Ballard suffered a training injury, and Solecki was reinstalled as the opponent. Now, for reasons that are still not clear at this moment, Solecki withdrew from the fight for a second time, and now Munguia is going to fight Sharameta. And Sharameta, the last time we saw him, got knocked out by Triple G. So the narrative of this fight is that Munguia wants to knock out Sharameta more impressively and more quickly than Triple G did. And he hopes by doing that, he'll set up a future fight with Triple G and Munguia.
And who do you like?
I like Munguia. He will win decisively. He'll win by knockout, and he'll look good doing it.
So, gals and guys, we know now that it'll be Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder 3 in about a month here in Vegas. And for whatever reason, Amber, I think that the third fight's going to be a lot better than fight two. Fight one was, well, actually, fight one was dominated really by Fury, other than we had the two knockdowns and the devastating one in round 12. But I don't know, Amber, I really think this third fight's going to be interesting, and I haven't made a pick on it yet. I'm leaning towards Fury, but what are your thoughts as we're about a month away?
I don't think it'll be all that interesting. The devastating fashion with which Deontay Wilder lost in this last fight, how do you come back from that? How do you become a different fighter to avoid that power and that overwhelming come forward attitude of Tyson Fury? I don't know, what is he going to do? How can he change? Can he change enough so that his defense is improved enough to negate all that? I don't think he can.
He's trying, Lee, with a new trainer, isn't he?
He is. He has a new trainer, Malik Scott. And Malik Scott, when he was a fighter, he relied heavily on his left jab. It was a really good jab. And if Deontay Wilder needs to work on one specific weapon to improve his chances against Fury, it is jab. And when he was a younger champion, the jab was very good. It was very accurate. It was very hard. But because he was knocking guys out with one punch, he fell in love with his power and he forgot about his jab. So against Tyson Fury, he's going to need that punch to establish range for the big right hand. And I kind of think that this whole series, the first fight, people thought that Deontay Wilder was going to continue his knockout string against Tyson Fury. And he did knock him down twice. And in the 12th round, it was a resounding knockdown. Fury got up, and I thought that Fury won the fight 9-3. Then in the rematch, Fury called his shot. He weighed over 270, 273. He said he was going to go right into the cannons of Deontay Wilder. He did that. He overwhelmed him, and he scored the knockout just like he predicted. So if the first two fights didn't exactly measure up to the narrative going in, what's to say that the third, it wouldn't happen the third time around?
To quote Larry Merchant, Jim Lampley's partner for so many years, it's the theater of the unexpected, and I expect something unexpected. Amber, do you have any advice for Charlie? He's thinking about having a fans-only page, and I know that's something big with you now. You have so many fans all over the country and all over the world. You become almost a global icon. What's going on? You don't have a fans only page though, do you?
No, you just lied there and said that I do.
Never let accuracy get in the way of a good broadcast. But wouldn't a fans only, you told me that I should have a fans only page.
And I totally think you should, because you love to take pictures of yourself. You love to pose sexy and send them to.
We're rapidly running out of time, folks.
On Plenty of Fish, and what are the other sites that you use? You already do everything that's involved to have a fans only page. Why not monetize it? I mean,
agree.
You spend so much of your time taking pictures of yourself.
So you think I should do it?
I do.
Okay. Will you help me with it? Because I can't set up anything. I can't even set up a YouTube page without your help. Well, I don't think I'm going to do it. I don't think the world's quite ready for that at this point, but
your reputation in boxing as being egotistical and all about yourself and a fancy dresser, it would so fit into it. I mean, I think you would have everybody laughing and totally supporting you. Oh, do you hear what Smitty did?
Do I can keep my clothes on though, right?
Yeah.
See, the line you should have said was, let's hope so. That would have been the line. On that note,
because you have a fans
I gotta have some laughter because
we're all gonna go subscribe.
Lampley has me. Wasn't that was a heck of an interview, wasn't it?
It was.
It really was. And Lee, I know you've known him a long time, and hopefully we'll get him back. It'll be really interesting to see too what happens, beyond that fight, because Amber Teofimo Lopez is now re-up with Top Rank.
Right. His
It
real
is.
promoter is Top Rank, and they have come to an agreement now, reportedly, for his future fights where he's going to be making some more money. And that was the reason that he had this fight on Triller, or has this fight, because they won the purse bid and offered him a whole lot more money than Top Rank was. So it created that rift between them. But now reportedly they have come to terms. And so does that mean that Teofimo's fight on Triller will be his first and last? Looking like it. So how sustainable is Triller, and have they even found an opponent for Oscar De La Hoya? How long have we been waiting to find out about that?
Yeah.
Indeed,
Maybe
I
Oscar
hope
can
they never
fight one of the other Backstreet Boys. Didn't one of the other NSYNC or Backstreet Boys have a fight with Lamar Odom the other day?
The brother of a Backstreet Boy.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope Oscar concentrates on
It's degrees of fame.
his promotional career and figuring out a way, now that Ryan Garcia seems to have his mental health in order. He's back doing the double in bag and everything on Instagram. Hopefully Oscar can focus on that. And what we'll focus on will be the 21st episode of In This Corner of the Podcast. And this one, a very enjoyable one. Want to thank Teofimo Lopez for hanging out with Amber there. And we hope he recovers fully from COVID. And of course, the great International Boxing Hall of Fame blow-by-blow commentator Jim Lampley, Lee Groves, Amber Renee Dixon, Charlie Burley. In This Corner of the Podcast, episode 20 on Fight TV. We're out of here.